Hello and welcome to the Deep 2 NBA podcast. My name's Sean and joining me as always is the one and only Dante Boff, Mr. Boffer Man. How are we?
Confused and annoyed.
You sound like the ESPN broadcast.
Yeah. We just watched the draft, or most of it. Probably like pick 50 currently.
Shoot us for not going on after 45.
Yeah. They really need to figure out the reporting of the trades. Both the NBA themselves and the media need to figure out how to do this appropriately so that you're not saying that this pick has been traded to the Timberwolves and then saying when they come up that the Grizzlies are taking the pick. Because even, Kendrick Perkins is not the sharpest tool in the shed, but even the analysts are getting confused about who's going where.
And it's just awkward when Perkins starts saying, he'll be a great pick for Houston. Like, I really like this group of young guards they've got. And then one of the other guys is just like, oh, he's not actually going there.
Yeah, they've just been traded.
Yeah.
Also not Mark Tatum coming out and announcing a trade that happened an hour and a half ago, and then B announcing the same trade twice.
No, but Mark Tatum announcing the Jerami Grant trade, which happened a week ago.
Yeah. There was also a trade that he announced where he only announced one side.
Yeah.
Like, this pick has been traded to Memphis.
Yeah. Well, in the eyes of the league front office, the Jerami Grant trade hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So, it must be confusing for them.
Yeah.
They're wondering where this pick's coming from.
The NBA, there's no need for them to announce it, and the media should just do it in the simplest, most straightforward way.
The media side is a little bit different because the team, the team could just say, we got 3 protected picks. Like, they don't have to announce what the actual picks are for a little while. But from the league's point of view, you just need to change the graphics. I'm just guessing they've got 10 team hats hanging out the back, right? Just change the graphics for the amount of times that the trade ends up being nixed, which was the last time a trade got nixed, the Lonzo Ball signing wasn't. So it was Chris Paul, right?
Yeah.
So let's say what the Jerami Grant trade ends up just getting, shot down. Then the embarrassment of you getting that pick wrong is minuscule.
You're getting the 24th pick wrong. No one will care or even remember.
And that's going to be one wrong trade out of the whole day. Like, the Jalen Duren trade's going through, right? So that's going to happen. But all right, we've got that out of the way. Do you want to talk about the actual draft and what you saw?
Well, I wasn't too shocked to see Paolo go number 1. So Paolo Banchero, thanks to friend of the pod and Deep 2 contributor Aless for making it abundantly clear that anybody who says it, Banchero, will be taken out the back and shot.
But Dante, there is a CH in his name, so I'm just wondering how you come to this conclusion.
It's the European genes. Also, did you know that Zakalo's wife is Croatian?
No way. He must be pretty good at pronouncing these names.
Yeah, he must be. I was pretty not unsurprised to see Paolo go 1. I thought in my head at least there was a clear 1, 2, 3 order, not necessarily in best player, but I thought in terms of what team is going to take who, I thought that Paolo would go number 1. Chet just seems like a Oklahoma City Thunder type of player. They've made that abundantly clear since drafting Poku a few years ago. And then Houston gets Jabari Smith Jr. at number 3. So no real surprises there until number 4, when your boy Keegan Murray jumps up to the Kings. And this is either going to be the Kings making a smart decision to not pair De'Aaron Fox with another very similar type player in Jaden Ivey, and they're saying we're going to look for complementary players, or this is going to be yet another example of Kingsiness.
Yeah. Because just like some other Kings picks, they announced this a week ago and didn't budge. You saw, the Orlando Magic has said they were going to pick Jabari Smith Jr. first and maybe Chet Holmgren for the past month. And then hours before the draft, Woj is like, they're actually picking Paolo. How wild. Hey, have a look at this. And they do that in case, if they cover all their bases and say, hey, with this number 1 pick, we're going to draft 4 different dudes. I think there was even a report that they're looking at Jaden Ivey. So as soon as they say, we're looking after everyone, everyone's like, hang on, that guy's our guy, or someone else says that guy's our guy. So then they're more interested to throw something in a trade or whatever that may be. So the Kings have again different front office, same ownership, just buried a hole, said, we're taking this dude, we know he's going to be available because it's an overdraft, so don't talk to us. I mean, there were discussions to move up there, but they took Keegan Murray, who might still have been on the board at the 7th or 8th pick. Might have been good to trade down, pay the guy less, maybe grab an asset on the way, but they did it. I wrote about him for the deep2.com. Obviously, you can always check that out. It's that simple as long as you have a solid internet connection. And I think he's going to be like Grant Williams with a very trustworthy shot. Grant Williams on defense, Grant Williams same body type, same position, which is amazing. Grant Williams was like a pick in the 20s, or so maybe you're better off getting your role players there. But they drafted what seems to be for fit, which for a team that hasn't made the playoffs probably should be worried about potential as opposed to fit. But it should fit. He's 22 years old. He should be better than a 19-year-old coming into the draft. But we've also seen that doesn't really matter recently. You get a lot of young dudes playing really well. So good fit, should be a good player. Could have got a better player. I think he's going to be good, but
the ominous part about it as well is that the last time that the Kings drafted a really good complementary player, he played really well for them, and then they traded him.
Who is this?
This is Tyrese Haliburton. Someone who was going to come in and fit around the pieces that they already had. They drafted him specifically because he would be someone who was malleable and versatile to fit amongst their established pieces. And then they traded him away. I think in particular, regardless of how Keegan Murray kind of like pans out, the value of this pick and of this decision will be determined by how good Jaden Ivey and someone like Shaedon Sharpe behind Shaedon Sharpe, who went 7th to the Blazers, how good they turn out to be, because they're the kind of like younger, high potential picks that could more reasonably turn into like a star. And for Sacramento to say like, okay, we have guys in place, we've got the Fox and the Ox, we're going to look for role players, is a bit like deluded.
Yeah.
Because they don't need the role players, they need the stars. You get the stars first and then find the role players.
Yeah.
So unless you think you're going to be able to get a star at the top of next year's draft, then what are you planning for? You're planning for failure, essentially.
But we know they're not tanking because they want to make the playoffs as fast as possible.
Yeah, and you can't make the playoffs when your best two players is Fox and Sabonis. But
all right,
we'll find out about that.
Moving on from a loser in the draft, let's talk about people as someone who. Let's say everyone is calling the biggest winner of the draft, the Detroit Pistons, and Troy Weaver. Another very busy draft night for him. There was actually a quote coming from James Edwards III out of The Athletic, who said that Troy Weaver said that this is the busiest draft night he has ever had. Obviously, they drafted Jaden Ivey with the 5th pick, who most people thought were going to be going 4th. Jaden Ivey, very happy to be in Detroit. As he said, he doesn't want to get drafted by the Kings. And then apparently there were just calls upon calls upon calls from teams just trying to get Jaden Ivey after he was drafted, saying, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. A lot of calls coming from the Knicks, and Knicks fans were very excited on Twitter for a little while, going, oh, we're going to do it. But then you start looking at the assets they could give up, and it's like, well, no, shut the fuck up. So Troy Weaver gets Jaden Ivey, who could be the best player in this whole entire draft and a great fit next to the players that they already have in place. And then from there, they go on in some very confusing way to trade with the Knicks to end up getting Kemba Walker and Jalen Duren. Is that right?
Yeah. Kemba Walker will be bought out. But to get one of the better big men in this draft, and someone who you wrote about for the Deep 2 on your little pre-draft look around. They needed another scoring guard next to Cade Cunningham, and they needed a big man who projects to be a good defender, because Beef Stew's just too small and he can't anchor the defense. And they leave the draft with those players, which is excellent. And now they're looking at a starting 5 of Cade, Ivy, Sadiq Bey, Duren, and someone else.
Another big man.
Maybe even throw Killian Hayes in there and go 3. That's pretty good. Like, it's a pretty good. You made the comment whilst we were watching that it's like a 2K team, and it is a bit like a 2K team to have like a whole bunch of dudes who are like 22 and younger. But that's, on paper, that's pretty good. Pretty good outlook. And Ivy, he does kind of have like shades of a bit of like a De'Aaron Fox, bit of a jar. He's a little bit bigger body. But next to Cade, who's not always like the most physically imposing, athletically imposing.
But we know he's a good passer, and he's been able to find bad guys in good spots for
yeah,
shots.
well, he came in as a rookie and was already an elite passer. So getting a guy who's kind of like combo, but really with more of a score first mentality in should be really good. Really good compliments for each other. Should we talk about the
Knicks side of things,
the Jalen Duren trade? Just the absolute clusterfuck of confusion about what actually
so yeah, there were multiple reports about what's actually happening here, and even some of the journalists who were reporting on it were saying like, shit, there's a trade with Charlotte, New York and Detroit. I couldn't tell you what's happening. Give it a minute. Do you want to try and explain what happened?
Well, essentially, the Hornets drafted Jalen Duren number 13, and we were both saying, wow, well done on them taking the best centre prospect on the board for a team that's needed a centre for the last 2 years. But then it was reported that he was traded to Detroit. Then the Knicks are involved. So essentially, Jalen Duren goes to Detroit. The Knicks salary dump so they can potentially clear cap space for a free agent push. And Detroit sends picks over to Charlotte. They send 1 first-round pick in next year's draft and 4 second-round picks. So I want to talk about the Hornet side of things because in my little Jalen Duren spiel for the deep2.com, you can find it in your web browser. It's that simple. I suggested getting on the horn with the Charlotte front office with the old mate Mitch Kupchak and the Hornets drafting Duren because obviously I just mentioned they need a centre. He's there. Lo and behold, I said, "Geez, this makes me look pretty smart." So they've traded him away, and then 2 picks later they've drafted Mark Williams, who's a centre from Duke. So they've essentially just said we prefer Mark Williams to Jalen Duren, and we can get him later whilst getting an asset player, which if they're right about that, that's a great trade. To get 4 second-round picks, which statistically speaking, like probably one of them will be a decent pick, at least. Like you'll get a pick in the low to mid-30s. And a first-round pick next year. Like if your dude ends up being better, then that's great. I really like Jalen Duren though. So if Jalen Duren ends up being really good, and in 2 years we're saying Charlotte needs a centre, then this is an absolute kind of clusterfuck of a trade for them.
Yeah.
And New York, it just looks like they want to clear cap space for maybe for a diminutive point guard from Dallas.
So New York, it looks really good because on paper you say they moved 1 first-round pick to get 3. So. They also
I didn't mention that they get 1 first pick sent out and 3 first round picks back.
So they ended up getting that Milwaukee 2025 first round pick that Detroit were able to get in the Jerami Grant trade. Which we will talk about the Jerami Grant trade in a second. But then then New York also drafted Osman Dieng with the 11th pick, and then as soon as he was drafted, raw prospect, can't shoot, 6'10", small forward. I said to you, Mr. Buffalo Man, Dante, how are we? I said to you, I wonder if Tibbs plays him. Like, he just doesn't strike you as a Tibbs player whatsoever.
Not only is he a rookie, he's also a teenager, and he's also French.
Tibbs' 3 favourite things. And then I looked pretty witty for that comment for all of 2 seconds, because then he was instantly traded to OKC, who had the 12th pick, and I thought maybe they're just swapping picks. What's the tiny move up here? But no, they drafted 11th and 12th. And they gave OKC 3 first-round picks for Osman Dieng. It was Detroit's lottery-protected 2023, Washington's lottery-protected 2023, and Denver's lottery-protected.
The Detroit one was even 18.
18.
Top 18 protected.
I think the following year is lottery-protected if it doesn't convey.
Yeah, so Denver's is obviously not going to convey. Or Denver's is obviously going to convey. Washington and Detroit, Washington is most likely that it won't convey next year because Washington will probably be in the lottery. And Detroit, top 18 protected, 110%. Even the next year after, Detroit's probably going to be in the lottery. So, they're essentially fake first. I'd be interested to see how far those protections stretch, whether they go 25, 26, or whether it's 2 years and then converts to 2 seconds. Because
I think the Detroit one keeps extending out for 3 years, but the others quickly turn into seconds, maybe after 1 more year. So they are bullshit first. I would much rather really just have the prospect. You're going to get 4 years of a prospect, even if you don't like him. You at least get him on your roster. Bullshit first. That if they want to trade to another team, the other team's going to be like, well, you're not actually sending us 3 first round player, are you? You're sending us these absolute bullshit that you got.
Yeah, and I mean, especially for New York, like obviously they are looking to bring established players in free agency. Not just now, but generally, that has been the ethos of the franchise for as long as I have been a basketball fan. With very middling results, one might generously say. But the team, as currently constituted, doesn't really have any quality young players. The young players on the team is like Rowan Barrett, which the jury is still out, and I know what side of that discussion I am on thus far. That he will not be like an elite level wing. They've got Quickly, who maybe quickly turns into a starting point guard at some point, but that's probably it.
It probably does. It's probably not great that New York's going to get a point guard ahead of him this year, this off season.
Yeah, and then who else? Am I missing anyone? Toppin, who has shown absolutely nothing and is locked in.
Cam Johnson's age,
locked in behind Randall.
They've still got Cam Reddish on the roster, who hasn't played much.
So they've got no like prospects, and all they've got is like middling veterans on big contracts. So the opportunity to add like a quality player with this pick, you're right. You'd rather have the prospect. If they've assessed it and said we're picking 11th and there's no one here that we think is worthy of being even picked 15th. Like we don't have good enough grades on anyone here. Let's just punt it and try and get assets. All right, fair play. If that's the case, fair play. But they
did that last year as well.
You'd find it hard to imagine, especially when Jalen Duren again. Like he was someone who could have gone there because Mitch Robinson's probably on the way out. Who's playing the 5? Nerlens Noel,
who is down for 40 games a year.
Yeah, do
you like Jericho Sims?
My opinion on Jericho Sims is also out with the jury. If Mitch Robinson leaves, which it looks like he will, it's just Noel. And if you re-sign Mitch Robinson, then that's another veteran. I know he's still a young guy, but that's another veteran that you're like locking in on big money when you could have just potentially signed a replacement who'd be paid less and might be better. Yeah.
Oh, it's like. They've set themselves up well here where it's like if they don't sign Jalen Brunson, which they now have the cap space just to take him in, they don't need to send anyone out, which, you're probably better off just trying to get off Evan Fournier's deal or something like that. But now they've got some assets where if they do want to make a second play if Jalen Brunson doesn't work out, where they can trade for Jalen Brunson and send these 3 fake first round picks out. Like that's fine. Like, if you're Indiana and you're going to get 3 fake firsts, one of them's probably going to be the 25th pick.
Yeah.
Fine. Like just do it. But like there's no real high ceiling on this team anymore because.
Well, I've got an interesting question to ask you then.
Yeah.
And I'll tie in a piece of news that broke this morning, which is that Kyrie Irving is likely to request a trade out of Brooklyn, with the obvious domino that will completely upset Kevin Durant and his position with the team. So dominoes could be about to fall. But if they are looking for a point guard and they can't get Brunson, because the whole thing as well is that Brunson might just fully re-sign. Day one of free agency.
They made the conference finals.
So. Day one of free agency, Dallas might say, here's $100 million over 4 years. Bam, on the table.
Or he could do a Kawhi and just shop around for 5 days and say, hey, Dallas, I'm coming back, don't worry. Yeah. Let me just waste these guys' time.
Yeah. I mean, like either of those are, I would say, more likely than he signs for New York.
If Knicks fans aren't tortured enough, they're going to get fucking strung along by like the 10th best point guard in the league.
Well, what about Kyrie as either a primary or a secondary option? I don't know whether you would say that Brunson is preferred because you know what you're getting, or whether Kyrie, who's obviously a better player but is a complete fucking lunatic, would be preferred. But they, can offer Kyrie
a full max
now, and they would also have potentially some assets that could go back in a sign and trade, because part of the report that came out this morning was that he would look to be sign and traded, which assumes that he thinks that there are contenders who don't have max cap space that want to open cap space for him.
Well, the big one at the moment is that the Lakers would be like his next preferred destination. I don't know how the fuck that works. How do you just evaporate Russell Westbrook's deal?
It doesn't work. They would.
But it worked on NBA Instagram. What are you talking about?
The Knicks would have to take Westbrook back on, and they'd be taking salary on for that, because Westbrook's number will probably be higher this year than the starting number for Kyrie's next max.
Can I just break in with some breaking news? The Indiana Pacers have selected Kendall Brown with the 48th pick.
Jeez. Okay, so they're calling him...
Are we changing? Should we start the podcast again?
One of my big beefs from watching the draft is that the Golden State Warriors, no, it was the Nuggets, selected someone called Christian Braun. It's Braun, which is a German name, and they're calling him Christian Brown. And there's nothing... It really gives me the ick, this idea of like someone living in like Midwest America, and they're just calling him Brown. Or that his ancestor emigrated from Germany, and people couldn't pronounce his name, and so they just started saying Brown instead of Braun, and he just let it go along, and then he started calling his kids Brown. Like, it sickens me.
It definitely sickens you more than me. I'll say that,
it got under my skin.
I've watched enough Terry Craig just to let it fly by. But I actually thought what you were going to say watching the draft with me just there now was that what sickens you is that amongst all this talk about, you know, teams potentially cutting costs, and we whenever we do a 4-man weave plus Marco, it seems like a rite of passage just to slag off the Cronkies, who haven't actually done a cost-cutting move yet, apart from the Jerami Grant trade. That still opened up a trade exception, but we are yet to see a major move. We'll just, you know, the jury's still out. That's the third time we've said that this podcast. But the Golden State Warriors spent $2 million to buy what I think was the 45th pick or 44th pick. A team that is paying a lot of money to have this team together, and when you purchase a pick, it is simply just coming out of the pocket of the owners. And ownership is the best competitive advantage in the league, as Danny LaRue often says. And, you know, if Golden State's willing to spend the money to get a pick because they like a guy in the second round, it's good to see that they're still doing it. And holy shit, it's so nice to take for granted that my team's going to do everything they possibly can to win. Like, this dude, he could be the next Jordan Bell, or he could just be a G League guy for the rest of his life. But it's nice to see that they're being aggressive and saying, we want this guy, spend the money to get him.
Yeah, well, it's the empowerment of the front office. Obviously, ownership has lots of reason to be to put their faith in the front office in Golden State, but they essentially are hands off, and they say, we empower you, we'll fund you in whatever way that you think is reasonable. And it is a great example of ownership. Unfortunately, it's not the norm by any stretch of the imagination, because there are far more Tillman Dirty Finger Fertitta than there are Joe Lacob and
Peter
Goober. Oh, what a gross name. Goober. Sounds like
first name Goofy.
Yeah, sounds like slang for a booger or something. Got another goober.
I think booger is slang for booger.
for snot, mucus.
Do you want to talk about the biggest trade of the day, though?
Is there a gag coming here?
No. So Philadelphia have traded Danny Green and the 23rd pick for D'Anthony Melton. This is an incredible trade, because for every team in the 20s, you should be ashamed that you couldn't get this deal done. Because I think D'Anthony Melton...
in the 20s that should be ashamed that had the 21st
Denver Nuggets. D'Anthony Melton is getting paid like $7 million a year or something along those lines. He's got one more year left on his deal. Philly actually saved money by trading away the $10 million for Danny Green, who's missing a ACL at the moment. Yeah. But D'Anthony Melton might be one of the best defensive guards in the whole entire league.
Oh, he is one of the best defensive guards.
Like, you know, top 3, I would say. Better than Marcus Smart, better than Patrick Beverley. He's one of the quiet defensive guards.
Oh my god! Is that a gag?
No,
you think Melton is better than Marcus Smart?
I honestly think that. Yeah.
I have to disagree with you.
Okay, let's agree to disagree, even though you're wrong.
Yeah.
I also think there's a couple of other people better than Marcus Smart. Some may even be wearing the same coloured jersey as him. But this is just such a great get for Daryl Morey. Like, Daryl Morey's copped a few hits for the past couple of months for the James Harden trade.
The handling of the Ben Simmons saga and then trading him for flat tire James Harden.
Yeah.
Michelin man James Harden.
But they've got a guy who's going to start and finish games at the 1 or the 2 for him, who's going to hit wide open threes. I cannot be higher on him. And I can't believe they just got him for the dead salary of Danny Green. Like, Memphis now has another dead salary.
Him and Maxey, Melton and Maxey is going to be like a jitterbug backcourt. Melton works best though, and this is where he really thrived off the bench in Memphis. in a faster paced system because he's a little bit kind of like helter-skelter. But if you get out in transition, he's really athletic. He's a good passer in transition more so than in the half court, which is not necessarily how Philly plays. I.e., it's not how Philly plays because everything Philly does is like ground and pound, slow it down, play through Joel. Unfortunately, play through Todd Harris. We'll see if he's still there. And Harden is like, you know, anemic to transition offense historically. So I do think there's a non-zero chance that even though everything you just said about Melton is true, that he's not actually fully realized the way that in Philly the way that he was in Memphis. And I also think Danny Green can be a valuable addition for Memphis.
See, when you said that, I couldn't believe it. No, not in a bad way. I just think he's done. Like 38 years old, torn ACL.
He's not 38 though.
What is he?
He'd be 35.
I think he's just done.
He's 35.
Okay. 38.
He might be done, and if he's done, he's just a $15 million expiring that you can throw into something else. If he's not done, he's going to come back the second half of the season and be like a veteran player, someone who's won championships multiple times on a team that's good enough to get to the third round of the playoffs, to get to the conference finals.
Yeah.
So he's also good enough to stand in the corner and shoot open threes, which there's a place for that in a playoff rotation, maybe not in the conference finals.
I don't hate it as a veteran mentor, but they did just draft 3 dudes, so they're going to have to find the roster spot somewhere, and you could easily just waive him.
Yeah, you could, but I still think that there's like that he has value other than just being salary. And then the guy that they got in with the 23rd pick that they got from Philly is David Roddy out of Colorado State, who's 6'6" and somehow weighs 260 pounds. He's the guy that you said he looks like a comedian.
No, he's got a podcast at least. Where do you want to go from here?
Should we talk about the Jerami Grant trade from a few days ago?
Yeah. So the Detroit Pistons traded Jerami Grant to the Portland Trailblazers for nothing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Outside of the Milwaukee pick, which was then used in the Jalen Duren deal. I initially, by the way, I say nothing as no players went back, I believe. I think they just straight consumed him because they had cap space to do so. At the time... Consumed? That's a weird way to talk about players.
Yeah.
At the time, I really didn't like the deal for the Pistons. It did open up enough cap space for them because they didn't take any players back. They could actually sign 2 max offer sheets, who 2 players out there might be DeAndre Ayton and Miles Bridges.
Banned conversation.
Now, after the flurry of deals they've made, and let's assume Kemba leaves like over half of his money on the table, that's now closer to just 1 max offer sheet and then a lot of cap space on the side. I don't think that matters really a lot, but I was a bit shocked because Troy Weaver has been parading Jerami Grant around everywhere saying we don't really want to trade him, but if we do, we're going to get 2 firsts. And I was thinking to myself, oh, maybe they're just going to get 1 first. Like maybe that's where the real value is, and he's fighting hard to get that second. But that Bucks, the 2025 pick, I think Giannis is 31 in that season, as you said before, middle of his prime.
Yeah.
I think like that's a really, really bad pick. And then part of the asset coming back there is cap space, which cap space isn't valuable in Detroit, especially if you're rebuilding. So I was a bit like, I don't love it.
Well, Detroit has been also mentioned as a possible Brunson destination. If he wants to kind of like be the floor general and get in on the ground level and build this up, which would be great. Like if your 3 guards are Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Brunson, like that's a pretty good place to start in terms of actual quality distribution. Now you just need people who can hit the shots. So you know that could be an instance in which cap space actually is valuable. Also, you mentioned like if they want to put down big money, those are 2 guys and 2 kind of player types that make sense because they're both young. They're both young veterans. They both have proven that they can produce at a high level. And play important roles on playoff teams. So that makes more sense to me than saying we're saving cap space so that we can get Bradley Beal or whatever.
Yeah, with the Ayton point of things, because one of the deals for Detroit to get Ayton was actually a sign and trade to move Jerami Grant back to Phoenix, and Phoenix gets a bit more defensive versatility and another shooter out there, another scorer. But this puts Detroit in a tricky situation where if they offer, hold on. Luke Travers. This is actually a whole
Luke Travers is
the Australian
from Perth Wildcats.
Pick 56, Cavaliers.
Wow. He's going to look so great next to Darius Garland.
Golden State just picked GUI Santos, a Brazilian wing.
GUI?
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 GUI? Yeah, sure. So with the DeAndre Ayton point of view, because Jerami Grant was going to be the player going back in a sign and trade, that gives Phoenix a bit of an incentive to say, okay, we'll do the sign and trade, done. But if now that Detroit don't have like a legit player to give back to Phoenix in any sign and trade, DeAndre Ayton can sign an offer sheet with the Pistons, and then Phoenix are like, okay, if you sign an offer sheet, we're just gonna match it, because that's obviously just good value for Phoenix.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden the sign and trade possibilities are like Shaedon Sharp and Yusuf Nurkic, right?
Yeah.
Because now that sign and trade possibility, so a sign and trade possibility for Detroit would have been Jerami Grant, and then both teams are signing off and that done. But now if Phoenix are looking at it like, you can either go to Detroit for nothing or go elsewhere and we'll get something back, they're just not going to let that Phoenix situation pass, that Detroit situation pass.
No, they're not going to. But I don't think that would be the outlook. It's not like you can go here for nothing or you can go here and we'll get something back. Like if DA leaves, we'll get something back regardless. We're going to match Phoenix is going to match whatever offer sheet gets signed. If someone gives him a max, it's getting matched. If they do actually want to move him, and the organisation is actually committed to getting him out of the building, it won't be for value, because the cat's out of the bag and everyone knows that DA wants out and where Phoenix is in a tough position. And I think the thing as well with sign and trades is that they're never fair value. In the moment, they are never like value. It's the selling team is saying, fuck, let's just get what we can.
Yeah.
It's always that way. So, trading him to Portland or trading him to Detroit, like the asset load isn't as important, because anything is better than nothing.
But what I'm saying is that Detroit have ruled themselves out now. By doing this, Detroit to say no more DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, for
sure.
Which
they might not have wanted. Maybe they were using it for leverage. But I just find it weird that James Edwards was always the one reporting with Shams. James Edwards being the Detroit writer for The Athletic. It usually, when there is something so closely tied to a team that is eventually going to happen and the source is coming from that team, usually you eventually see that happen. But the fact that Detroit and through James Edwards were the ones that were constantly saying DeAndre Ayton, and then all of a sudden they've ruled themselves out of that because Phoenix is never going to pick that avenue now. It's a bit like it's a lot of effort for Detroit to be used in that way for it to not end up happening. Which, I suspect that maybe they did really want DeAndre Ayton, and for whatever reason they don't want DeAndre Ayton again. That could be because they found a trade that they didn't think existed for Jalen Duren, or maybe DeAndre Ayton says himself that he doesn't want to be there. I don't know what it is, but I just find it weird that they've gone ahead and ruled themselves out of it by trading away Jerami Grant for a pick that isn't very valuable.
Yeah, well, the pick certainly isn't very valuable, and especially when you think that there were probably 2 first-round picks or a first-round pick and a good player on the table at points last season leading up to the trade deadline for Jerami Grant. It becomes worse. But then you look at what they've done today, and you mentioned off the top that they're being talked about as winners of the draft, and I think it's within the realms of possibility that they have essentially done what you have said and said, we can either look at trying to get DA into the building on lots of money, sending out assets, or we can just do something else and bring in another guy. And Jalen Duren looks like he's going to be pretty good. He's only 18, it's 18 and a half, so it'll be a while. But Cade Cunningham is 19. They just drafted Jaden Ivey. DA is only 24, so it's not like he's wildly off the timeline. But if you bring DA in, this becomes like a DA team immediately. Like Cade Cunningham, he was amazing as a rookie. He's perceived as the future of the team. Without Chris Paul and Monty Williams and the veteran infrastructure in
100%.
Phoenix to keep DA on task, it's going to be more like what we saw in his rookie and sophomore seasons, where he essentially just wants to be LaMarcus Aldridge, doesn't go near the rim, takes every single, literally as soon as he fucking catches the ball inside the arc, he's shooting it. That's what you'll get. So it makes sense to me that they might look at that situation and say, yep, maybe this guy does actually have lots of untapped offensive potential, and it's not out of the realms of possibility that he could score 25 points per game next season, because he is that sort of offensive player in a big sample size. But let's keep it it's like cooking the sauce low and slow. Let's just
of course,
cook it slowly, release the flavour. We got time. There's no reason to rush. And the other thing as well is that Jalen Duren costs how much? $5 million a season, and
4 years at least.
Yeah, for 4 years, and DA would be starting at like $30 million
for 4 years. All right, let's talk about the Portland Trailblazers side of things, and not just the Jerami Grant trade. They've obviously done it. They've acquired Jerami Grant on the cheap. They kept their number 7 pick, which yesterday was rumored to be sent back to Toronto for OG Anunoby, as Kendrick Perkins said, OG Anunoby. So This is still in play. Obviously, we saw Andrew Wiggins got drafted in a Cavs jersey, then ended up getting traded once LeBron James came. So I believe, I don't think that's changed since that CBA, but I believe Shaedon Sharpe can still be traded. Where is that? Yeah, you're nodding your head. Shaedon Sharpe can still be traded, so they've obviously got a really raw prospect. They just got the best prospect available there. So they've got Shaedon Sharpe and they've got Jerami Grant. How are you feeling about the Portland Trailblazers?
Well, I don't think Shaedon Sharpe really moves the needle for the type of team that Portland wants to be, because they're making it very clear from bringing in Jerami Grant that they think they can be a playoff team next season. And Shaedon Sharpe didn't play at Kentucky all year. So he definitely is like one for the future. It would be extremely surprising to see him come in and play a role as a rookie. But there would be teams around the league that would potentially be interested in bringing him in. Bad teams that have like a good veteran role player or like a good veteran starter. I am generally pretty down on this idea though. Like, I just don't think that it's going to work, and I think that with the Portland organizational tree right now, with ownership being in flux, the former owner Paul Allen passed away a few years ago. There's rumors that the team is going to be sold.
Yeah.
And the team is more valuable to Jody Allen as an asset if the franchise is good rather than if they're awful. So through my organizational tea leaf reading, I think that there's a conversation that's been had with Joe Cronin where the mandate has been given, you are going to try and make this team good because
we're selling it next year
and we want to get that extra $100 million.
There was also that weird thing where Phil Knight publicly put forwards an offer to buy the team. Phil Knight, obviously the founder of Nike, and he had a few people in his team that said, look, to all Portland fans, I'm from Portland, love the team, love basketball, Nike dude, I just can't wait to buy the team. I've put forward this offer of X million dollars or X billion. And then Jody Allen comes out and says, no, we're not selling. I don't know where you saw that. And it's like, well, you are selling. What the fuck are you talking about? So I think you're right when you say that she does just want to wait half a year. What if Portland is the third seed halfway through the year and it's pretty good? If
the third seed, it's an extra $200 million in value, because you're not just acquiring the IP and the facility and all of the organizational things that come with it. You're acquiring the quality of the team as well.
Yeah.
And it becomes a more enticing business proposition for the buyer to say, like, I'll be able to make money off of this team sooner. The problem with that on our level of interaction with the game is that they are not really in a position where they should be making these moves, and their ammunition is kind of like lacking because you bring Jerami Grant in. Okay, we saw Jerami Grant in a featured role for 2 seasons and it was mixed.
So it was good for the first half of the year.
Well, it was good for the first half of the year, but no one really wanted to. Everyone wanted to talk about Jerami Grant averaging 19 points per game. No one wanted to talk about him shooting 40% from the field. So he kind of changed into a completely different player. And if you're getting that player's not actually that valuable, because not only is his defense slipping because he's taking on a higher offensive load, he's also not actually performing that well on offense. Not that efficiently anyway. So what's this team? It's Dame and Anthony Simons.
Just written it down. Anthony Simons are getting paid a lot. Nurkic has to be re-signed this off-season. They've got Jerami Grant, and they're going to pick up Josh Hart's $10 million essentially team option, but non-guaranteed.
That's a bad team. Unless Damian Lillard is first team All-NBA, that's a bad team.
And they've got, 2 years ago he was, right?
Yeah.
But they have Shaedon Sharpe, who can be bundled with Josh Hart, all right, before free agency. No, he's a free agent.
No, but if you like you include him in a sign and trade.
Yeah, I know, but who's going over the hard cap to get you Nurkic? Like, I don't think it exists. So, but like Josh Hart, good player, $10 million. I'm sure they've got some salary flotsam floating around. They've also they can re-sign Jingle and Joe Ingles, who will start the season on the bench. He won't be ready for training camp
probably.
with his injury. So yeah, I think a package of Shaden Sharp and Josh Hart gets you somewhere. Maybe you can throw in.
But where does that get you? Like, what level of player?
Yeah,
like does that get you?
It doesn't get you OG Anunoby.
No, and I wouldn't even think it gets you close to OG Anunoby.
Yeah,
like I think the maximum level of player that would get you would still be worse than Jerami Grant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Unless there's a team.
Well, Jerami Grant was just traded for a $25 pick.
Well, unless
and
there's
you're giving up the 7th pick.
Yeah, but the issue with the pick having been made is that it's now not a pick. It's Shaden Sharp, and there's X amount of teams in the league. Let's just say 5 teams in the league that want and can fit and have a role for Shaden Sharp. That also have a player that's valuable for Portland, because you need a veteran player who can step into the starting lineup and produce immediately. And the list of the teams that would want Shaden Sharp are often the worst teams in the league, and they don't have those veteran role players.
Yeah.
Maybe they did maybe there's a team that's done like what Detroit did with Kelly Olynyk, where they're like, we're going to pay you $13 million a year. You don't fit the timeline, but come in and be a leader, whatever. Maybe it's like something like that, but those opportunities aren't plentiful. So by having made the pick and not traded it to a team that can, do what they want with it,
it's less valuable.
It's less valuable, yeah. So I think that Jerami Grant is probably the max in terms of, not in terms of looking at that value of that trade, but a player who's going to come into the starting lineup and be like a good starter. Like, I really can't see Grant being more than that for this team. And I think adding another Grant level player by shipping out Hart, reducing your depth in doing so, and Sharp, I just don't think that moves the needle.
All right, we'll close that conversation by saying some breaking news that Sharif O'Neal has just joined the Lakers Summer League roster. Sharif O'Neal, son of Shaquille O'Neal.
Wasn't he like the number 1 overall pick?
I think
the number 1 overall recruit.
Oh, hold on.
Going to LSU.
Toronto Raptors just signed Ron Harper Jr. on a 2-way.
Wow, shouts to Lucas Traders. That's for you, LP.
And Hugo Besson, who played for New Zealand this past season, the French guard, goes 58th to the Milwaukee Bucks. All right. Do you want to wrap this up by saying, I know you don't have NBA 2K22, but if you did have a copy of it, or if I lent you my whole entire computer, what is the team? Give me 2 teams that you're going to go on a My League and start simulating some seasons after today.
Well, I think one absolutely is Detroit. I think Detroit would be lots of fun. I want to kind of my gut's telling me Spurs, but the problem with the Spurs is that they have now got 6 guys who are all mid first round picks who are all probably going to max out at being good. So there's no superstar potential.
If you're starting today as the Spurs, you can easily get to max cap space, which is what I did last week and signed Zach LaVine.
no fun going max cap space in 2K. It
is for a Zach LaVine destination.
Yeah, true. Well, but I want to grow my players, draft my players.
Sorry, mate.
I think they're quite clearly the Pistons are that new one, because you've got your starting lineup locked in on long-term contracts. You know that at least 2 of them are really good and have potential to be even better. Not forgetting to mention Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart on the bench as a nice
hard to use in 2K.
Still,
you're not factoring that in.
I haven't played 2K in so long. But yeah, I think that would be my answer. What about you?
Probably Orlando, because I would love to. Yeah, Paolo's probably going to be pretty fun to use in 2K.
He'll be so fun to use in 2K.
Colin Anthony is not very fun. Markelle Fultz is fun. And I'm just going to get John Isaac in the trade machine, show offers. 22 teams are going to offer me something for John Isaac. And I'm like, sweet, there's Buddy Hield coming back.
Take a copy of your book on the way out. Before we wrap up, probably I just want to share this Fox Sports News NBA headline.
Please.
For I don't know if we ever talk about it. on the pod that much, but for the listeners, like if you like Fox Sports News basketball stuff is worth a follow because it's just presented in the absolute worst, most Australian way possible. So this is a headline from earlier today. Former All-Star dumped in $23 million master plan as Aussie drafted. Giddy gets boost. Now,
who's the former All-Star dumped?
It's Kemba Walker. It's Kemba Walker. He's the former All-Star.
Holy shit.
And the best part about it is that we all know like players' contract details by the American dollar, and they do. Fox Sports News Australia does their dollar conversion. So someone will sign like $174 million max, and they'll be like $240 million megastar.
Yeah.
And it's very quaint. It is very quaint.
One other thing before we wrap up. I went to the dentist yesterday.
Oh no! Oh no! I hate where this is going.
Went to the dentist. We've obviously spoken about this. What would it be? 6 months ago from today. It's also going to be 6 months from today. Next time I go.
Next dentist story.
And I really wanted to make it 12 months, but I just faltered on the line. I was sitting there, receptionist. They go, book it again for 6 months. Okay, yeah.
Well, that's better than the receptionist booking you again for 12 months, saying like, I'll book you in for the 29th. It's a Wednesday at 3 p.m. You free that day? It's like, well,
no. I understand the joke, haha. But every Thursday and Tuesday at 4 o'clock, I am free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing can change between now and a year from now.
Yeah, exactly.
You will still be free.
So anyway, I've got the dentist is a codger, and then I've obviously got the cleaner who's the one, the promiscuous one.
The promiscuous dental assistant. I hate that trope.
But the codge goes in, got his little mirror, right, and he goes, "Oh, you're my last patient of the day." I'm like, "That's why I book it. Don't want to be here long." we both got things to do, mate. Like, I'm happy if you just lie to my face, and you're happy if you get to go home early. Goes in, he goes, "Oh, looks all good. Yep, here's your last X-ray. That's good as well. God, not very good for my mortgage, but on to the cleaner." And I go, "This is why I do it. Like, it's like NBA, hashtag this is why we play. This is why you book 4:45 on a Thursday, man." Shook his hand. Good on you, mate. I'll see you soon. Going to the cleaner. "Oh, how you going?" She's clearly got some notes written down from the last time I spoke to her. I'm like, I don't actually want to be here. Like, this is one of the most anxiety-inducing days of the calendar.
Anxiety-inducing and something else inducing.
Yeah, it's just a world in there. That little room, it induces too many feelings. And then I'm just like, "Oh, okay, you're bringing up some notes from 6 months ago." "Yeah, still working from home, hybrid." Oh God, hurry up, let's go. So painful. Like, just getting your teeth clean, not ideal, and hardly even a payoff at the end.
Your teeth feel worse after.
Yeah, there's holes in them.
Well, your gum. I find my gums also feel like really like I'm aware of my teeth in my gums, and there's like a painful feeling. You're never aware of your teeth.
That's not something I want to be. Yeah, exactly. No. No rogue feelings this time.
Yeah.
Missed out on the old, "you got to clean here." I missed out on that. So literally
that is rogue.
No returns. Fucking huge investment, no returns. I'll report back in 6 months. I'm like a FIFA scout when you send me out in 6 months stays. But yeah, so, I said to you before I went to the dentist, hey, we've got a big pod coming up tomorrow, and there's a reason I've left this for the end, not leading with it. Mr. Buffalo, man, thanks for coming on, and I'll speak to you next week. Thanks for coming on like you're a fucking guest. Thanks for having me. We were over the moon when we first heard that the NBA was going to be televised on Australian free-to-air TV in the 2019-20 season. It didn't exactly go swimmingly, with the nasty cough halting the season and games getting cancelled left, right and centre, but it was a huge step and an exciting one for basketball fans all across the country.
Better yet, it wasn't a commercial channel cashing in on some basketball nerds like us. It was SBS, one of our public broadcasters. Unfortunately, the NBA wasn't the only thing SBS was pushing last season. They also ran advertisements from Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Bet365, BetEasy, and Neds, some of the biggest sports betting companies in Australia.
In a one step forwards, two steps backwards move, SBS has dropped the ball here. As a public broadcaster, SBS plays a key role in providing relevant, culturally appropriate health information to local communities. The last thing SBS should be doing is offering a platform for gambling companies during the most financially unstable time in recent memory.
This past year, men aged 18 to 24 made up 79% of new gambling account holders, with increased median spending and frequency of bets. This is the last thing we should be spending our money on given the financial uncertainty that comes with the pandemic. During COVID lockdowns, wagering companies spent more money on advertising and incentives to gamble, and it worked. SBS needs to hear from viewers that gambling ad revenue isn't worth the harm it causes. Call on the SBS chair, George Savitas, to put community health ahead of gambling revenue by signing the petition at www.endgamblingads.org.au/get gambling off SBS with hyphens in between.